Welcome to the On Your Mind podcast, where we believe mental illness can be temporary and transformative. Stay tuned for innovative, effective tools from experts in the field of mental health. Hosted by Timothy J. Hayes, psychologist. This podcast aims to change the narrative around mental illness. Move from a place of fear to a place of hope and solutions. Here on Your Mind.
Martha Glory Kartaoui is a resilient and courageous warrior who has transformed her life from being a cult survivor to becoming an influential voice and leader in the wellness industry. As the owner of PIC Wellness, LLC, she is dedicated to helping others achieve their best overall holistic health, mind, body, and spirit. Martha is also an Amazon best-selling international author, a dynamic speaker, a life visionary, and a skilled healing workshop facilitator. Her unique blend of professional training, personal experience, and spiritual wisdom enables her to walk alongside survivors and support profound warrior transformations. Her own healing journey and insights inspire others, making her a beacon of hope. Martha is dedicated to assisting individuals seeking to reclaim their lives in order to thrive in their own journey towards self-discovery and divine fulfillment. Well, Martha, welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm delighted to be able to talk to you about your book, Glory, Going All In. And there's so much of your story in the book that I'd like to just throw it open and ask you what you're hoping people will take most from a book like this. It is so rich and so full of your personal life story.
Wow. To put it just in like an acorn nutshell is what I want them to take away is that our trauma doesn't have to define us. We get to rewrite our story at any time, but it is a choice and it has to be intentional. And the other takeaway is that you're not alone in your pain. You're not alone in your trauma. That's one of the hardest things that I had to learn is after all the experiences that I had that I share in the book, I felt so alone in my pain. I thought nobody's going to understand my story. Nobody's going to understand what I've been through. It's too crazy. It's too painful. It's too whatever, right? And so I stayed alone in that pain for over a decade, before I was like, no, there's got to be a different way. There's got to be healing. There's got to be something more. And that was a big illusion that I was under that nobody would understand because pain is pain, trauma is trauma. Just because they didn't share cult trauma, their trauma is trauma, and people do relate. So that's the other takeaway.
So when you say that for over a decade, I thought that, are you marking that from the time that you got out of the cult at 28?
Yes. So I escaped the cult when I was 25, and I've been on this healing journey for almost 20 years. In December, it'll be 20 years. And it was a first decade before I could talk about this at all publicly, like outside of my family or a very, few close friends. I didn't talk about it. I just couldn't. So that would be the decade that I'm referring to is just that first decade after I escaped. If you include the 2 decades that I was in the cult or 2.5 decades that I was in the cult, of course you didn't talk about what was going on then. You don't whisper about what's going on then, not even to your own family.
Yeah, that's one of the very difficult things for people outside of a situation like this to comprehend is that even within your own biological family, the secrecy was so pervasive. The fear was so well nurtured and cultivated.
Yes.
So people can read in your book about the horrors, and sometimes in books like that, people say, feel free to skip through this part if you want. I encourage people to just read it because I don't think you put a lot of the gory details that would, be inappropriate. However, what I like to do, especially when there's the evidence and you presented it and people can read your book and they can hear about the trauma, I like to focus on, so how did you get to at least started on the path of healing. And just to begin with that question, how did you break that within your own mind, that own cycle of, I can't ever change. I'm just too damaged.
Yeah. That idea was pervasive. I'm just too broken. I'm just too damaged. There's nobody that can help me. Nobody will understand, right? But what happened in my particular case is that my physical body started breaking down. I started having outward manifestations of a very inward issue, right? Like my trauma was the inward issue that I was covering up and I was burying and I was swallowing, right? And so eventually I was in my early 30s and my physical body just started breaking down. I had chronic migraines, I had chronic back and neck pain, I had fibromyalgia, I had PTSD. I had this litany of diagnoses from all these specialists because my body was just breaking down. My body could no longer withstand all of the trauma that I had buried for so long. I didn't understand at that point, and neither did our Western medicine and healthcare system, that there was a connection between the two because I was not yet talking about my trauma. I wasn't yet drawing that conclusion. So for me, my physical body's breaking down, and I ended up in a continuing education class because I'm a manual massage therapist, and I was in a continuing education class for somatics. And we started talking about how trauma is stored on a cellular level in our bodies. And there was just like this like deluge of bells and whistles going off, going da 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 da, Martha, this is you. And it was like that moment where I was like, whoa, it's all connected. All of this is connected. All of my outward stuff is just a manifestation of an inward problem. And so that is when I, grabbed the bull by the horns and I said, no, I'm going to become my own advocate. I'm going to figure out how do I get inward to start healing that so that my body, my outward body can heal. And so that's my journey started. I started researching, I started reading, I started getting books, I started anything that I could find that talked about trauma being stored on a cellular level and how to heal that. And that led me to all these different modalities that I talk about in the book, like EMDR, hypnosis, biofeedback, neurofeed, and all the ones that I talk about. So
I like to think as you tell that, which I didn't quite get from the book in that detail. So thank you for that. I like to think that what happened then was that was like some moisture and sunlight getting poured on the seed that had been planted by the gentleman that helped you escape, who introduced you to the concept that you had value enough. And I forget, did you mention his name or you just talked about him as?
I call him Papa, and that's what
Papa.
I called him. Yeah, Papa.
And that, that was so powerful to me. Did you recognize the connection you had when he came into the store?
Yes, I did. When I think back on it, and unfortunately he's passed on, and so he would be so proud of me right now, though. And I know that he and I will reunite on the other side someday. But I remember the first time that we met, and it was like both of our souls were just connected on such a deep level from the moment that we saw each other. It was like these rays of light were just connected. And he saw me and I saw him, and we recognized each other on a soul level. And over time, that relationship would flourish, and that relationship would be the first trusting relationship outside of my immediate family that I ever had. Papa was my first real person where I actually understood him and he understood me, and I could actually be Martha and what that meant, right? And I didn't have to carry around these lies and all of the baggage that my whole life carried because I wasn't able to be authentically myself. Papa taught me the importance of being myself. And I only scratched the surface with him before I ended up leaving the cult and then, began my own life. And I only got about 8 years with him after I left. So he didn't get to see the full unfolding, but I know that he would be so, so proud.
So here's that idea that the kindness that he showed you, the connection the two of you shared was that that impetus for all your future growth, even though it didn't take off like a rocket in the beginning.
Yes.
And what I like to bring up here is that because people are going to say, well, how could all of this happen? And I like to reinforce the idea that we observe in this work that it's my secrets that keep me sick. And the mechanism behind that is that if it takes me 10 units of mental energy to hide something from someone, whether it's I have candy in my drawer and I want everybody to think I'm a 100% healthy eater or whatever it is, that same amount of energy gets poured into feeding the conclusion within me that I'm damaged and broken and unlovable. And that if whoever I'm hiding this from, this secret, if they find it out, they're either going to attack me or run away from me. Now, if that's something that I encourage people to observe in their lives across the board, even when you're out in a healthy, loving family, relationship, community, even then, that dynamic is still working. Imagine how much that's amplified in the kind of intense, violent, abusive environment you and your family were subjected to.
Yes. Yes.
And
you're
even
hiding from everyone. You're hiding from everything. I was hiding my trauma and my abuse from my own family. I was hiding my trauma and abuse from the outside. I went to public school. My friends, my teachers, like my very best friends, and I talk about this in the book, never knew about my abuse, never knew I belonged to a cult. They saw glimpses of the crazy behavior or the praying, on our hands and knees when they would visit my house and things like that. But they only got little teeny glimpses and never asked the questions to make me. I would have lied anyway, of course, because that's what's ingrained in us. But nobody, even that was the closest to us, knew what I was going through in any of those years.
yeah, it's. I just flashed on the book "What My Bones Know"
Yes, that's a
by
great
Stephanie,
one.
and
Yeah.
she had friends that never knew that her mom left when she was 13 and her dad left when she was 16, and she was basically raising herself.
Yeah.
And she made it to school and she held down jobs. And when people find out after the fact, they're shocked because there's so much of a cover up. There's so much of a sense of, I need to keep this secret to survive
Yes.
or to protect the people that I love.
Yes. And just like in that book, I was labeled the same thing as she was with complex PTSD, right? And I carried that around almost like a badge for a while because it was like, well, there's an explanation for all of the things that are going on in my body, why I can't focus, why my, outward body is failing me, all of those things. I carried that around as a badge for a long time. And I got the same response as she did when she finally started talking about like what she had been through and being abandoned and all of those things that had transpired since. I have my friends from my childhood going, we had no idea. How did we not know? Like we shared everything. And it just the proof of how strong our mind is for good or for evil, for protection or for good, like our ego is wants to keep us protected and wants to keep us safe that it'll go through the ends of the earth length in order to do so. And so, yeah.
So you have this awakening when you're taking this class on somatics and they say the trauma is stored in the body at a cellular level. Let us in a little bit on, and given the disclaimer that no one size fits all. It's not like there's a magic trauma reduction technique that equally works well with everybody that is tried on. But what were the most useful things for you in pulling yourself back together and getting rid of some of those energies of trauma and getting started on your path to healing?
Yeah. So if I have to rewind kind of back to the beginning of the therapies that I tried, talk therapy did not work for me because every time I started telling my story, the therapist's jaw would just open and they would stare wide-eyed at me, and I would then start crying and crumble, right? So what I found is that I had to take myself back to that inwardest most place where I could find that healing. So things like EMDR and neurofeedback and biofeedback were the three that really helped me to get back into my body, because I had disassociated for so long from my trauma, from my physical pain, from my sexual pain, from, my spiritual pain. I had disassociated for so, so long from those things. And so I had to get back in my body. And people don't understand what that means when you are truly disassociated from such extreme traumas. So, neurofeedback and biofeedback really helped me to tune back into who I was and to heal those deep places in order to make me available to start talking, right? Because you're not able to start talking and to work through the things that you've been through until you are able to get into your own body and get in back into your own story. And I had to go back in order to move forward. Does that resonate?
Absolutely. It's the idea that I can't tell you what's going on with me if I've cut it all off. Everything below here I'm not paying attention to. I just have these thoughts of words, and that's the dissociative process as an adaptive mechanism. Most people don't, most people label it as, psychopathology or whatever. It's not a pathology, it's an adaptive mechanism. It helped you stay sane through insane and intensely insane and abusive life events. And now you've got to reverse that process. You've got to convince the protective part of your mind, will say, that it's okay now to go visit those energies and let them go and have these memories and be honest at different, deeper levels about the thoughts you've had, about, whatever the most horrible thoughts are that we have, we hide from ourselves. And if we want to undo the effects of them, we got to go back and be honest about them again, because it's just energy, it's just information, it's just a thought. But our mind has labeled it as, that'll be our death. Right?
Yeah.
That'll be the end of me if I look at that again.
Yeah.
So it makes really good sense that the EMDR, which helps you focus inside and just does some bilateral, stimulation, and the neurofeedback and biofeedback would be exactly on target for you as a kinesthetically oriented person.
Right. Our protection brain, like you just described it, our protection brain is just that, meant to protect us. And when I left the cult, I really thought I could leave everything in the past and just start a new life. I was so naive to think or to understand how all of that would follow me. But in my naivety, like, I really thought, no, I can just never talk about it again, never revisit it again, and I can just start a new life, and I can just act like it's never happened, right? Unfortunately, that is an illusion. Again, it's not how our minds work. And eventually my protection brain even freaked out. And when your protection brain freaks out, then everything around you begins to fall apart. And that's when you understand nothing's safe, right? I was in a safe marriage when this happened with the most loving human that I'd ever known. And yet I felt so unsafe. I felt so betrayed. I felt so alone. But it's just everything kind of imploded on me, and I had to start going back inward. I had to reconnect this with this, because for so long I had just been up here.
Well, and if you think about it, it makes really good sense if you understand that protection brain at that level doesn't have any tools for awareness of or tools for resolving the trauma. And so it has this conclusion that we can't look there. We can't go in that direction. We won't survive it. And based on everything that protection brain or that younger part of me knows, that's the truth. And that's why it's so important for people to get the message to ask for help. Because until you get some help, until there is some awareness of what the problem is and what tools might be available to help me work through it, and what the fact that there can be support from the outside for me that would be healthy support, unless those things start to happen, you can't force yourself to turn around and face those things that your brain is hiding from you.
Yeah. Well, your brain and your nervous system, right? Like my nervous system was in a permanent state of fight or flight, permanent state of fight or flight. So if I wasn't creating chaos in my life because of all of the years of trauma and all of the years of abuse, if I wasn't creating chaos in my life, my nervous system was like, ah, and so I had to retrain my nervous system. And things like craniosacral therapy are things that helped me to manage my neurosystem or my nervous system and help my nervous system to recalibrate, right? And that was a process in itself, is because I didn't realize I was in I was creating chaos just to survive because it's all I knew. My nervous system didn't know how to be in a loving, stable, secure, safe state of being. That my nervous system didn't know how to do that.
Well, and it reminds me of Peter Levin's work with the trauma work and the somatic work and the book Waking the Tiger. Acknowledging exactly what you're talking about, that there's been an adaptation at a visceral physical level in our central nervous system, and it is so intense that becomes our norm. We aren't aware that we have resting states available to us and calm alert states available to us, etc. So it's a primary target for re-education from somebody who's had a lot of physical and sexual trauma, to get them to be aware that it's safe for them to be aware of their internal processing and actually allow themselves to regulate to a lower level of agitation or stimulation.
Correct.
So you mentioned in that you mentioned what was the thing that you just mentioned? The technique,
Craniosacral therapy.
the craniosacral therapy, that wonderful, very gentle manipulation of energies to get the cerebral spinal fluid flowing. And were there others that in the therapeutic process that have helped you take your work to the next level?
Yes, and I share a lot of this in the book, but I don't go into depth about them just because, like you said from the beginning, is one size doesn't fit all. This is what worked for me. And for me, it was a layering. As I got one layer deeper in going inward, I was able to expose myself to another therapy that would help me to go even further in. Some of the work that happened once I got kind of the nervous system regulated, some of the things that helped me then were yoga, breath work. Breath work was very important. I didn't realize I didn't know how to breathe because I'd literally been holding my breath my entire life. And what I mean by that is when you're constantly in a state of fight or flight, the first thing you do is embrace for impact because that's your life. And so I had to relearn how to breathe. I had to relearn how the process, even though it's on automation, right? Breathing is automated. I had to relearn how to properly breathe. Now my nervous system that wasn't on that high alert all the time. I had to relearn how to breathe when I was regulated. And I continue to have to do that because as I continue with this healing work that I continue to do on myself, because we're never at an end goal. We're never like, I'm healed. That doesn't exist. So I continually have to re-regulate and learn new practices in order to keep up with the work that I'm doing in order to continue the healing process.
Well, I'm real glad you mentioned the breathing. I was just in a session yesterday with somebody who's 77 years old who got exposed to a breath technique. And he said after a couple minutes of that, he had the deepest breath he's had in his entire life because he had traumas in childhood. And so he hasn't been breathing in that open, relaxed way for 70 years, right?
Yeah.
So you mentioned spirituality. How do you define that, and how is that practical for you in any sense?
So spirituality and faith for me have been pivotal in uncovering who I am in the deepest sense of who Martha Glory is. And what I mean by that is I had to, because I had all of these labels and identities put on me my entire life by other people, right? I had to uncover who Martha Glory was. And I couldn't do that without going back to, well, where did I come from? Why am I here? There's got to be a purpose bigger than myself, right? And for me, that was God. I was created and made by God in the image of God, which is love. So if I take it that elementary, and for me, spirituality is that elementary. And what I mean by that is I come from love, I am it love, and I will go back to love. So anything that doesn't represent that is not doesn't fit in with my belief system or my faith system, right? Because everything goes back to God and where I come from and who I'm created to be in this life. So when I learned, where I was created or how I was created from love, I then had to learn how to love that creation myself. And that was a painful uncovering because I didn't know how to love myself. I didn't feel worthy of love. Even though I very much wanted to heal, I didn't know that healing would require me to love myself or even like myself, right? And that was a painful uncovering. And I wouldn't have been able to do that without faith and without knowing where I came from and knowing that my purpose is bigger than myself. And that gave me the motivation to continue to do the work.
So, as you're talking about that, my brain is bubbling up with ideas like, so did you have conscious, literal thoughts about how you were the reason there was a defect in you that was causing you to be abused?
100%. Yes. Yes. Because why wasn't my other siblings? Why didn't other people have the same experience that I did? I must have been born defiled, right? There must have been something wrong with me that at such a young age as 8 or 9 that a grown man would molest me. Something was wrong with me. Not that grown man, that there was a defect with him, right? The problem was me.
Right. And so it started even younger than before. A cult man would tell you specifically in those years where he was restricting your food and beating you, etc., that he would be telling you that this is all your fault. But even younger than that, as a kind of a natural process, we see this a lot with children. They try to make sense of their world in a way that gives them any kind of power, right? So if I'm getting beaten by a monster and I didn't cause it, I've got no power. But if I'm getting beaten by a monster and it's only because I was bad, then I can change. I can change
Right.
my bad behavior and maybe the monster won't beat me. And it doesn't make any sense to the adult mind. But within a child's mind, it holds perfectly together.
Right. And I carried that burden throughout my entire life into adulthood, right? All of the horrible things that had happened to me happened because there was something wrong with me. I was bad. Or cult man liked to talk about that our heart was not right with the Lord, or our spirit was of the devil, or whatever it was, right? And so I was constantly looking at myself saying, I'm just not aligned. I'm not aligned with, my spirit's wrong or my heart is wrong. And that's why these bad things happen to me. There's something wrong with me, not with the people that are perpetrating.
Yeah, yeah. And so two things came up as you were just talking. One is an ancient understanding of the process of what people have called the devil. Is it's an internal process of resistance that misleads us from the truth. It's not about anything external. It's not about an outside spirit, etc. And the other thing is, here's all of this energy that's been accumulating in you, mind energy, physical energy, spiritual energy, etc., ever since a very young age, that's all about how you're damaged, you're broken, you're unlovable. And as you said earlier, there are probably still some remnants of it, maybe in your elbow or there's little. So here's an idea of a tool that people use. I call it targeted journaling. Dr. Michael Rice calls it the mind shifter. But at one point when I was doing an internet show with somebody who had a very abusive past in childhood, I was prompted to give her this targeted journaling prompt. And what we do with this is we write this on the left side of a sheet of paper and then draw a line about a third of the way towards the right margin. And then we give ourselves a block of time, an hour or two, to sit and respond to this prompt. And the prompt I gave her was, there has never been, nor will there ever be, a person who has more value than Glory. So she came back and said, I can't do that because I don't believe I'm better than anybody, which of course is part of the process. There's nothing in that statement that says you're better than anybody. It says you have the same value as everybody. And if you sit with that and let yourself respond to it as a prompt, you might uncover some more of those little nuggets where you don't feel so loving and lovable forever.
Yeah. So I've done a lot of that work. And at the very beginning of that work, it was extremely painful. Louise Hayes talks about mirror work. And that was how I got kind of initiated into this type of work that you're talking about right now. And that mirror work was some of the most difficult work that I've ever done, because it's just you and the mirror, which is just a reflection of yourself. And if you're looking at that mirror and you can't think about anything positive, all you see is all the ways that you've been defiled, all the ways that you've been hurt, all the pain that you are. If you can't see anything positive, which for many years, I didn't even look at myself in the mirror because I couldn't face what I saw. Because after I got out of the cult, from the outside, I looked way worse than I ever did inside, right? Because now I was overweight. Now I was, had all of these other outward issues, where when I was in the cult, I didn't, because I was constantly burying them. And now I was safe. And that's when everything started exposing itself. But it took such a dump on my outward appearance that it was just so hard to look at myself in the mirror and say anything positive about myself. But I stayed at it, and I stayed at it, and I stayed at it, until one day you're able to say, okay, Martha Glory, today you are kind. Like, you have to find one affirming word to hang on to,
that you can
and then
believe.
the next day, and then you have to believe it with every fiber of your being, right? And so I had to start with emotions for me, because I was always kind to other people. Regardless of what happened to me, I always showed up in kindness and love. And you can talk to my parents or my best friends all the way back to childhood. I was always a kind kid. I stood up for my brothers and sisters, and I stood up for myself. And sometimes that led to, some fisticuffs. But for the most part, I was a kind person. So I wrapped my identity around kindness when I first started this work, because I knew that about myself. And I could hang on to that little nugget of positivity, of affirmation, of something that I am, right? I am, until you finally go, I am lovable. I am magnificent. I am smart. Wow, I'm a good writer. Wow, I'm strong. Wow, I'm resilient. Because that happens over time, but that took a long time for me. That was probably some of the deepest, hardest work I had to do.
Excellent. And I'm so glad you're letting that out and letting people know it was a long time and some of the hardest work, because that's what we experience, that we can make little steps here and there, and we can have the craving to be done, but in truth, this is a process, right? This is not a destination I'm going for. This is just moment to moment. I can get triggered. And if I'm willing to turn inside when I get triggered, rather than blame people or circumstances outside of me, then I at least have a chance to move towards resolution.
Yes. And it's ongoing. Thank you for pointing that out. This is ongoing. I still catch myself. And now I've been doing this work continuously for almost a decade, right? But I still will catch myself looking at myself in the mirror and something will snap for just a second about my physical body or about something, right? And then I have to redirect it. I have to go back inside and I have to take the time with the mirror and I have to be able to redirect that energy because whatever that I'm sensing in that moment, mental, physical, emotional, all of it's connected. And you have to redirect it inside to where I know the truth now lies. Because what you see in the physical often is an illusion. You have to go inside where the truth lies in order to speak the truth over the illusion.
Well, and when I start redefining those moments of upset or those negative thoughts, originally and in a lot of our culture, we define those things as problems or as bad. But if I redefine it as just a part of me coming up for healing, right?
Yeah.
As the alarm system to wake me up to, hey, Tim, you got a trauma energy that's just been resonated that's available for healing, or right now what you're focusing on is the wrong few bits of information, or you're focused right in the right area, but you've got a negative interpretation of it. Spin that kaleidoscopic wheel of interpretation until you land on something neutral or positive, and then take an attempt at understanding it.
Yeah. And what you're describing for me, I call it the interrupter, right? We have to interrupt that thought pattern in order to recreate the synapses that need to be formed in order to create true and long-standing healing. So the interrupter is so important to be able to recognize when you need to ignite that, right? Because thoughts, it all starts with thoughts, and our thoughts are power. Our words are power. And we either speak that over ourselves or we destroy ourselves with them. So you have to be able to interrupt it when it begins in order to continue to reconnect those synapses, those neural pathways, and understanding that this is true healing to be had.
Yeah, and so I have a list of bottom line observations I give to people in a first or second session, and one of them says, if I have a negative thought about myself or someone else, or a negative emotion active in my mind, body, energy system, I can instantly know three things. The first one is it's either a lie or based on a falsehood. The second one is this is an old tape playing. It's not about the present moment. This is something from the past that's up for healing. And the third thing is if I sit and spin thinking about this, if I let myself speak or act from this, I'm just going to make my life situation worse. I can't make it better. Right? I can't improve my present moment experience by throwing negativity on it any more than I can improve dinner by throwing garbage on the buffet table right before dinner time. It doesn't enhance the dining experience. And if I can get that logged in and think about these things at the beginning of every day, hey, Tim, alert yourself when you go negative. Catch it at the earliest warning sign. It's so much easier and so much more productive.
Right. Right. And it takes a lot less unraveling, right? Like
catch it before the momentum gets built.
Correct. Because if you don't, the unraveling takes just as long as how it took to get you to that point. And that was another realization that I had to have for myself is you can't do anything like this, but you can change your thought that quickly, but you have to interrupt it.
So I hate to acknowledge this, but we're moving towards the end of our time together. So let me ask you to take a breath and get centered and think about perhaps what's an aspect of your book or your story that we haven't even touched on yet that you want to put out there, or one of the points you've made that you want to go back and highlight.
So the title of my book is Glory Going All In, Cult Survivor to Courageous Warrior. And the reason that I talk about cult survivor to courageous warrior is because that's been my process. I was a survivor for many, many years before I understood what it meant to be a courageous warrior. You can survive and never do anything positive with it, right? And so now my purpose and my mission isn't just to publish a book about my story because thousands, millions of people do that every day, right? I want to make an impact. I want this to resonate with the people that are stuck in their own traumas, in their own stories, and be able to see that there's light, there's hope, there's promise. But you have to step into your own story and you have to step into your own healing. And so the principles that I talk about in this book, the going all in principles, are all principles that I have used in my own healing in order to catapult me into this courageous warrior and what that really means. You know, being a courageous warrior is a lot more than just courage. It's about standing on who you are, owning your worth, your worthiness, your lovability. It's about understanding truly who you were meant to be and why you are here to be that specific person in this specific time, because only you can be you. And that's what, that's my mission now, is to be able to resonate with those people that are just surviving and offer something saying, hey, there's more than just surviving. You don't have to just stay stuck in survival mode the rest of your life. There is something after surviving. And that's becoming this courageous warrior and what that means to go all in as a warrior, using the principles that I teach in the book. So.
Excellent. Well, that's a powerful distinction. I know that most people who go through levels of abuse like you and Stephanie Fu and so many others do not move past surviving. They don't have either the internal fortitude, the opportunity, the gifts of support like you got from Papa, etc. And so it's delightful that you're willing to try and promote that for people and to ring the bell, bang the gong, so to speak, to let people know that that's possible, that a lot more than just surviving is possible, that turning your trauma into your triumph or the seeds of your triumph are, it's also a possibility.
And I never want to make it sound like this can be done instantaneously. This is work. But I no longer feel like it's hard because I'm invested in myself. When I learned what it meant to love myself and what it meant that I was worthy of the healing, it no longer was hard. Yes, it's taken time. Yes, there have been hard things to overcome along the way, but it's not hard work any longer because it's for me. The biggest investment we ever will make in our physical life is for ourselves, right? We have to invest in who we are before we have the fortitude or understanding or bandwidth to invest in anybody else. So for me, I want to always be very direct in saying, like, this isn't just snap your fingers and you're healed. It's work, but it's worthy work. You're worthy of that work. You're worthy of that healing. So that's what I want to be able to tell anybody that this may be resonating with right now. This isn't instantaneous gratification, but you are worthy of all of the time and effort and energy that you will put into your own healing.
Yeah, I resonate with this. There was an exercise I would give people I still do from time to time, and one of the key phrases in it is, I've never done anything to deserve the abuse I've received in my life. So that's in the recognition that a lot of us feel like, oh yeah, I deserve this, or it was my fault. And the way you're saying it, that you are worthy, is like the brighter side of that. You do have value and worth, and you're worth the effort it's going to take you to heal, and you're worth all of the good that will come from your work to heal. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here. How do you prefer people connect with you?
Social media. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, Martha Kartaoui, Kartaoui, or you can find my book on Amazon, Glory Going All In. I mean, I'm an open book. So if you find me on social media, I generally will respond. And my contact information is in the back of the book as well. So.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time and for your work and the courage it takes to write a book like this.
Thank you so much. This has been my pleasure.
Martha Glory Kartaoui is a resilient and courageous warrior who has transformed her life from being a cult survivor to becoming an influential voice and leader in the wellness industry. As the owner of PIC Wellness, LLC, she is dedicated to helping others achieve their best overall holistic health, mind, body, and spirit. Martha is also an Amazon best-selling international author, a dynamic speaker, a life visionary, and a skilled healing workshop facilitator. Her unique blend of professional training, personal experience, and spiritual wisdom enables her to walk alongside survivors and support profound warrior transformations. Her own healing journey and insights inspire others, making her a beacon of hope. Martha is dedicated to assisting individuals seeking to reclaim their lives in order to thrive in their own journey towards self-discovery and divine fulfillment.
You've been listening to the On Your Mind podcast, offered by Journey's Dream, where we support people through mental health challenges to a place of true and lasting well-being. If you love our show, we invite you to visit onyourmindpodcast.org to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our helpful resources. Thank you for listening.